Hi, Mike.
Hi, Chris. How you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Welcome to our spring showcase. And you're going to spring something on us and showcase us something. Uh,
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to stay organized and give you all the information about what we've got coming along in the pipeline here.
that's great. And you are the founder and lead
Yeah,
designer of Rockmanor Games,
correct.
yeah, who everyone knows from, at very least, Set a Watch, which was reviewed very favourably in our magazine uh, last year, maybe the year before, even. I think
That sounds
2019.
about right. I think it came out, well, not this past summer, but the summer before,
That's it.
because it came out like at Gen Con when it existed.
Yes, yes.
The last Gen Con that existed, it was out.
That's right. Yes, we're gonna talk about a few exciting things. But before we get there, shall we just do a quick introduction of yourself? Would you mind telling the fine people at home who you are, what you do, and why they know
Uh,
you?
sure, yeah. I am Mike Gnade. I am the lead founder, final end boss at Rockmanor Games. Um, Rockmanor Games is a small indie publisher. We started out just, like most people do. I had my own game idea. I published it on Kickstarter. It was just a little thing. Um, and then I did another game, and that second game was Maximum Apocalypse, which is a little more successful. And I actually had my second child at that time. So
Uh-huh.
I was selling another business that I did, and I was going to be a stay-at-home dad for her because my wife was getting a new job. So for life choices, it was like, oh, I'll just do this
Mm.
at home on the side. And then because of the success and everything, and doing it when my daughter would nap, etc., I've just kept going on with it now, and she's almost 4 years old in April. So I've been doing it sort of full time. Well, not full time. At first, it was like part time because I was doing so much with the kids. But now I'm sort of doing it full time now that the kids are in school. Um, so yeah, I'm just. My wife's like, "Well, you're doing okay, so just keep doing it if you enjoy it." So
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. And also, there's a lot of parents at home who are just saying, "Wow, his children sleep long enough to make board games."
well, originally, I mean, you don't sleep a lot at night, but it's like then when the kid would nap during the day, when they're under two, they nap a lot, or they at least nap consistently.
Yes.
Um, what's been a nightmare is COVID with them, like in snow days. Like
Mm.
last week, I lost 2 days of work because the kids were at home from school because of snow days, and
Yeah.
then now they're back, but it may snow later this afternoon. I've got my fleece on. I'm hoping it stays warm. It's
Yeah.
like crazy.
It's right. So, shall we roll straight on to uh, what's coming up?
Sure. You know, the most recent Kickstarter we did was a sequel to Set a Watch. It's called Swords of the Coin. Um, so in that, it's Set a Watch. It's standalone, but it works and is completely compatible with all the originals. It basically introduces more monsters, new mechanics with coins and items to more fully customize or upgrade your characters as you play. And then, of course, you've got new adventurers to select from with some interesting mechanics. In the original game, we only had D6 and D8 characters. So one of the big design challenges for Todd and myself for the second one was, well, I want a D4 character. I want a D12 character. How do we balance that when, between D8 and D6 characters, there was a little bit of, D8s are obviously better in the game. It's just better. You can roll better.
Yeah.
But we tried to offset that with sixes being really valuable for healing. And like the D6 characters had sort of like more powerful abilities. So doing D4s and D12s was like a little crazier.
Yeah. That sounds great. And for those at home who haven't heard of Set a Watch, it's a game about basically having your kind of like your D&D party has just set up camp, and they're about to settle down for the evening, and one person obviously stays up because we all know what's going to happen. There's going to be an attack
Yeah,
of some sort.
yeah. The designer Todd is actually a huge Dungeons and Dragons guy, and as he got older and wasn't able to play Dungeons and Dragons with his group as much because his son's like 10 years old,
Mhm.
he really wanted to design like that collaborative combat experience that D&D has
Mhm.
and put it in a box that could be played in under an hour. Um, so it gave him, it scratched that itch a little bit without him having to get together every month or whatever he was doing for 2 or 3 hours to play his D&D campaigns because it just wasn't happening as much anymore.
That's great. And so the new mechanics involve. Can you explain the new sort of coin mechanics?
Sure. Yeah. So the base game is completely like the original. So there's a line of creatures trying to make their way into camp. Use your dice to defeat them, and either directly as their value results or spending them on your cards to activate abilities. The difference is before you go to that watch phase, there's a camp phase where you chop wood and do things in camp. And now, whenever you don't do something in camp, coins accumulate on that spot. So it incentivizes you to mix up what you're doing in camp, and then go after those coins, and you collect those coins. You can also get coins from defeating creatures. Some creatures say, like, when you defeat them, you get coins. So you accumulate these coins. It's a shared resource. It goes on a merchant board. And then every round, there are items the merchant has that you can purchase. And every round, he gets new items. So you can buy items, and you can give items to whoever you want when you purchase them. Each person can hold 2 items. And the items basically act like abilities. There's sort of 3 different types. There's passives, which are like passive abilities that adventurers have. There are actives, which use dice. You use a die to spend on them to do the action, just like an ability. And then there are cards that you can discard. So like potions and stuff are like one-shot uses. You drink the potion up, then it's gone.
That's great, and they integrate really well. So do you end up with a bigger, crunchier game if you smush these 2 games together?
I would say so. I think the sequel, Swords of the Coin is, a lot of people on Board Game Geek said the first one was easy. So we've made the second one a lot more difficult. Okay. We've done 2 things, I would say, primarily from the design perspective. We wanted to make it more difficult, but we wanted to also reduce the swinginess of it. Mm-hmm. So the original had like easy cards and like hard cards, and there wasn't a lot like in the middle. And what we've done is we've gotten rid of, I think we've more evenly spread out the difficulty amongst the cards. Mm-hmm. So there's very few, there's still a few really bad ones, which you have to scout ahead to make sure you don't hit. But in general, all the cards do something like bad to you, but it's like more equal. There's not like the big punches. And then I would say that a lot of the new adventurers are sort of crunchier to use. So, the knight from the original game is pretty easy, hits really hard in the first position with D8s. The barbarian with D12s, they are really cool, but you have to exhaust their abilities to use them. You can't activate their abilities with dice. So they're constantly pushing that exhaustion level. The witch has a familiar, because D4s was really hard to balance, so we gave them a familiar, a cat or a crow, to sort of act as an extra dice, an extra, you're not rolling it, it's a set number that you can use to attack. The trophy hunter has to really think about which creatures they're collecting to optimize their abilities, because their abilities are all augmented by the types of creatures they've collected for trophies. So if they collect a dragon, they're awesome against dragons if they kill a dragon. If they kill undead, they're awesome against undead, as long as they have that trophy. So, I would say for people who are new to the game, Swords of the Coin is definitely crunchier. Definitely, it's going to be harder to jump into. But people who are familiar with the basic game mechanics will probably enjoy the complexity of the newer characters.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. I'm looking forward to that a great deal. Do we have a retail release for it?
There will be a retail release. I am hesitant to tell any timeline for things because of COVID, and freight has been a nightmare getting out of China. Yeah. So we have a game that we kickstarted at the beginning of the pandemic called Lawyer Up. Mm-hmm. That is still, I would have expected it to be in retail right now.
Yeah. Okay.
or next month-ish, based on normal timelines. But we have had a nightmare situation with trying to get games on ships out of China.
Yeah. I think everyone's very familiar with this now, because everyone's dealing with the fact that no one can get anything.
And it's so erratic too, because like that game, like Australia went off, got on a ship, no problem, and like arrived 10 days ago. Meanwhile, the US is still waiting. Like the US and EU are still waiting. But the UK got picked up, and the EU shipment was supposed to go with the UK shipment, but like they left it or missed it. So
Wow.
like it's just all like the type of problems I've had with it are like all brand new.
Amazing.
I'm told now that Chinese New Year's over, it's supposed to be getting better.
Yes.
But we'll see. So assuming all that stuff clears up, I would say that we should have a retail release in the summer or fall. I would say summer, but because of it, I'm going to say fall.
Okay, cool. That sounds absolutely correct. And I think you won't be the only person saying that at our showcase. Cool. What's next?
Shortly after Swords of the Coin, as part of Swords of the Coin, we're doing our first roll and write game based in the same universe. It's called Emergence of Magic.
Mm-hmm.
So that merchant I sort of talked about that's in Swords of the Coin. In Emergence of Magic, you play a merchant similar to that, either that merchant or your own merchant shop. You play as a bunch of competing merchants trying to, make the most money, get that coin, make the most coin by selling these items that the adventurers want. So everyone gets their own shop. You get your own sheet. You can make your own shop name. And then adventurers come into your store and tell you what they want. So they want a health potion, they want a divine sword, they want a shield, they want armor. So these rows of cards sort of make their way through your store like a conveyor belt. Because if you wait too long and they're telling you they want something and you don't give it to them or craft it, they're gonna leave. They're gonna move on to your store, Chris. So they may leave my store and go to your store to find the item that they want.
That's great. I love the idea that you're going through all of the kind of like downtime elements of RPGs and just all the sort of like weird, like the weird bits. Because like obviously we play an RPG usually to talk about stabbing monsters, going into dungeons, finding lots of loot, and that sort of thing. That's the traditional way to think about it. And then a lot of us actually really enjoy stuff like shopping. And things like that. And I love the idea that you're sort of filling all these gaps.
Well, I feel like there's a million dungeon crawlers and like very few of these other like ancillary things about these fantasy worlds. And the cool thing about Emergence of Magic is you also sponsor an adventurer. So you'll see the adventurers from Set a Watch. One of them you will sort of sponsor, and that adventurer will say, "I need these 3 things," and those are sort of three of those cards that never leave your shop because that's your guy.
Yeah.
You're in charge of the barbarian. He's your sponsored guy. So you have to provide them with what they need.
So sort of like an adopt a barbarian sort of situation.
Well, yeah, you get the knight. You get whoever you get. But it's sort of like a secret objective, except it's not secret. But you deal out the adventures at the beginning. You flip over who you're sort of working towards. So it gives you some other cards to work towards, even amongst what's in front of you.
Yeah. So is this a traditional roll and write with rolling dice?
It is roll and write. Yeah, you roll 4 dice, 4 different types of dice. So there's a D6, D8, D10, D12. And they all represent different resources under different columns. So like the D6 can only be used for, I think it's steel. So it's like the first column. Only the D6 can be used for that. Then the D6 and D8 can be used for the next column, which is like wood and leather. And those are the 3 resources you use to craft things. And then you have an enchantment row, or your spell research is the other thing. So you want high rolls for crafting and low rolls for spell research. And the larger dice are used for spells. So the D12, D10, D8.
Yeah.
So, but that spread also means that like even with the randomized dice rolls, like you can always do something. Like you can always craft something usually. It's just a matter of when you're going to use. Obviously, high die rolls on D6, D8, D10 are really good. So it's about when are you going to use those high dice rolls and capitalize on what exactly you're going to use that steel for when it becomes that really good steel when it comes in to use it for. Because crafting stuff like plate armor and helmets and swords is more difficult than like a spear, where you can use like not the best metal. So yeah, you use basically you roll those 4 dice, you pick 2 of them to use. You fill in circles on your sheet, and then when you complete a row of all the materials needed for the item, you circle the item and you get the coin associated with that. And then you have, say it's spear. Say I finished all the circles in the spear row. then I can make spears for the rest of the game. I have now crafted spears. I know how to make spears. But when the things that people are looking for, as far as the cards go, is they want Spear of the Elves, and that's the enchantment part. So you need to get multiple parts of your board to start unlocking. So you may unlock an enchantment like Divine, where you can make Divine whatever you have, but matching up the item to the spell based on the card that's in your shop and what the customers want is sort of the challenge of the game.
Yeah. That sounds great. I love this stuff. This sounds fabulous. Also, I'm just a massive fan of anything that uses the natural weird curve of an RPG dice set. Just those different steps of dice. Just anything that's using them. Just I think is elegant somehow. That's fabulous. Okay, so and what is our? I think is this our final thing?
Sure, it can be our final thing.
Well,
I mean,
we can always go on.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that's definitely in stores now, as far as when the showcase is happening. But that's Maximum Apocalypse RPG.
Oh, Maximum Apocalypse RPG?
Which you guys actually, it's something that actually is out, so we can send it to you guys. So yeah, this is an RPG. It was actually designed by a fan of the board game. And it is... we call it sort of a medium weight RPG. So the combat is very crunchy, but then the storytelling is very loose. So, in our sort of development and process, with Todd and Scott working on this, they very much like the crunch of some of those old RPGs when you're getting to the combat, but they don't like the crunch with all the storytelling and all the delays in getting to the next fight. Yeah. So, in RPGs, there's sort of a trend to do these like light, these story light RPGs.
Yeah.
So we're trying to sort of bridge that gap and have something in the middle where the combat feels very crunchy, but then the storytelling is very loose and fun, and you can get through something. The play sessions aren't crazy. There's literally 2 phases in the RPG where it's like storytelling. We're doing a bunch of different stuff. The rules are relatively loose. The GM may tell you to test a couple things as you're picking locks, searching for things. But then when you get into a fight, initiative happens, turn order matters, like sort of more crunchy stuff snaps in and happens.
Yeah, that's great. I've had a look at it and only briefly, but it looks fabulous. But I just like the array of strange people immediately on the cover. I've got so this is the core book here.
That's the core book. Yeah.
And so what we've got on there, we've got not only the usual sort of someone wearing a I'm going to say Wastelander mask of some kind, sort of that everyone wears in the Wasteland apparently after the world has ended, because the world has ended.
In Maximum Apocalypse, the world ended in several different ways.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's not minimum apocalypse. It's not middle apocalypse. It's not the garden variety apocalypse at all.
Yeah, like in England, you guys may have, your society may have collapsed because of an alien invasion. Meanwhile, over here in the United States, we're dealing with like a zombie apocalypse. It all just sort of overlapped.
Yeah. I also like the fact that there's not only the Wastelander masks. There's also there appears to be a cowboy. There's someone.
Yeah, we call him the gunslinger. Yeah, he's like a policeman, sheriff type.
And of course, there's a fireman, fireperson as well. Which I just think it's good to have major important traits represented.
I mean, I think all of the survivors in the RPG are based on classes from the board game.
Yeah.
I think we're working on an expansion for the board game. And some of those classes that we've been working on over the past few years may have made it into I think the thief is one of the new characters that's coming to the board game is in the RPG sort of early.
That's really interesting. I like that.
There may be a couple other that sifted through because, I worked with the designer of the RPG and I was basically like, you have all the games so far, everybody that's coming, but since we're working together, here's some like other people that are going to be showing up.
That's cool.
And, I let him use them if he thought that it would serve the RPG well as far as, mechanically or support role or whatever he needed to flesh out things in the RPG. The other cool thing I thought we did with the RPG is we leaned into our graphic novel sort of comic book look.
It's beautiful.
And instead, despite many backers and people wanting hardcover books, we actually decided to go with sort of a soft cover bound, satinish comic book, like graphic novel look.
Yeah.
Which I mean, maybe eventually we'll have like a hardcover that accumulates everything into a big book, but hardcover adds so much expense.
Yeah.
And I just felt like let's keep it affordable for people. Like, we want people playing it. You can always make deluxe things later. The important thing is to see if it has legs.
Mm-hmm.
And people are enjoying playing it first,
Yeah, it's weird. That I think that's what I had in my mind as soon as I picked it up as well. That this is like volume 1 of a graphic novel series. That's it's that thickness as well. I think that's a great choice.
I mean, it's what we wanted to do. I mean, I felt I'm not the biggest RPG guy. The number of RPGs I've played in my life, I could probably count on one hand. I've played Maximum Apocalypse the most because obviously, as Scott was working on it, I wanted to play it and play test it with him. I leaned heavily into the graphic novel thing, but I felt sort of justified when people like Todd, who have played. I mean, when Scott and Todd got together, Todd's the designer of Set a Watch, and Scott is the designer of the RPG. And we met at Origins. We all went to Origins, in 2019 together. And they would just talk about stuff, and they were like using words and naming things I'd never heard of, like obscure RPGs and systems from like the 90s and 80s. And I was like, wow, you guys really know what you're talking about. But the thing that Todd said about having the different books is he's like, when you're at a table, if you only have like one hardcover book and you're playing with 5 people, you've got to all share it and pass it around. He's like, if you break it up, he's like, it's really nice because you can have people can easily share stuff, The GM can keep the GM guide. People don't take it from him.
Yeah.
The monster manual can get passed around. And then if people want their own core book or need their own core book, they can have it. But we also had like the screen we developed, the quick start screen, is actually like a player reference thing. So like if people you could literally get away with those 3 books and quick reference screens, and everyone could have everything they needed without feeling the need to like all have everything or be fighting over the same thing.
Yeah, or just a lot of photocopying,
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you do need your player sheet, which is always photocopying. That's always photocopying.
We're never gonna let the printers disappear completely. Yeah. That's great. You mentioned a Maximum Apocalypse follow-up there, or expansion.
Yeah, that's definitely coming to Kickstarter sometime this year. I would have thought, if you had asked me a while ago, I would have thought it would have been around the time of this showcase on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But I think we're looking more like the early of the summer, and depending on when we finish stuff up, I may even push it to the fall.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's called Wasted Wilds, and it's basically fast forwarding from the original game, and I'm actually borrowing a lot of elements from what Scott has introduced in the RPG. And so the original game was a roguelike. You just picked a mission and played through it. There were sequences of missions that were loosely tied together. So if you played through Zombie Mission 1, 2, and 3, there was sort of like a loose narrative to that. But for the next game, we're actually going to do 2 campaigns. So several missions tied together with a much stronger narrative structure. I'm hoping to then hand that narrative structure over to Scott so we can make RPG, campaigns sort of based on a similar story, so we can have some overlap. But yeah, basically the idea for Wasted Wilds is all the apocalypses happened, 10 years ago. We've been living for a while. Things are scarce. And now sort of the structure of humanity and the tribes that humans have set up and the groups of survivors that have set up, those are the real threat more than even the aliens that have invaded and the zombies that have been killed off or whatever. Those threats have sort of subsided. And now we're getting into more like, this is my tribe, you're a different tribe. We don't get along necessarily, but they're not as, relating to those NPCs a little more complex than the normal monsters. Monsters just attack you. The things that are out in the wild and humans, you can ally yourself to them, you can trade with them, they can get angry at you, they can get happy with you based on how you interact with them. And then the 2 campaigns are going to sort of revolve around environmental collapses. So the apocalypse is now extreme cold, extreme hot. And those are what the 2 campaigns are going to center on. There's sort of like the hot and the cold. And with that comes exposure. So now the tiles that you explore in the game are all marked as indoor or outdoor. And if you're stuck on an outdoor tile when exposure hits, you may get hypothermia, you may get frostbite, you may get sunburn. If you're playing the hot, you're gonna get sunburn, sun exhaustion, and you start getting these maladies that just stick with you, draining your health or preventing you from moving as fast as you would, dropping your equipment because of your heat exhaustion, whatever. So that's sort of our new status effects that are coming around.
It's very good. It's very cool. I like the sound of that. I like it when the game fights back. In a way you don't expect. There's throwing monsters at you is one thing, but when the actual environment hates you, that's something I really enjoy.
It's something I wanted to introduce something a little crunchier to the game now that it's been out. We have so many expansions, but that process was difficult because making a new character was a lot easier than introducing. Had to take all these modular bits from all these other expansions and make them usable, in every mission, in every campaign, sort of how you want. So with that came sort of this idea of like a clock board. So as you take turns, the clock sort of ticks towards day night, which is something we introduced in an expansion. There's a way for us to sort of expand on that and make it more cohesive. So around the clock, we have exposure, day, night, and then the tribes of humans that you're interacting with. So
I like that. I like turning it into a real world that has things happening, like without you, kind of.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff that happens without you, and it's all things you can interact with. So, the humans are very much, what did you do for me lately? So if you haven't been trading with them, as time goes on, they sort of, whether they're friendly or angry with you, their tempers cool over time. So if they're pissed at you and attacking you, they'll cool over time. But then at the same time, if they were your allies and you were trading with them, but you haven't been doing it lately, they're also going to cool to you and be like, you guys aren't so great anymore. When you haven't given us food in a while, whatever. So
that's great. I love that. So, and what's the name of that expansion?
It's going to be called Maximum Apocalypse Wasted Wilds.
Wasted Wilds. Brilliant.
So it may be on Kickstarter during this.
Yes, we'll see.
But most likely it'll be coming soon. We should at least have like a sign up or something by then, I would think.
That's great. Cool. Is there anything else?
There's always, when it comes to games, I could talk for hours. There's some new stuff we're working on. I won't go into too much detail because it's still in development. It may change, but
tease it for us then.
We can tease. So we have a game called Seas of Havoc that's coming out. It's a naval combat game that combines deck building and worker placement. Cool. It was designed by 2 Canadian designers. It actually won some Canadian design awards, so we're publishing it. We actually met them in an online speed dating, because that's what you have to do now without conventions. So that's something we're working on. We're working on sort of giving it more personality with characters and boats, like more character. So when you pick a boat and a character, it feels a little more different. But otherwise, the core game is fantastic. Obviously, winning awards. The core game's really solid. It's just we're adding some personality to it and some theme. So we're working on like.
Is this naval? So it's not pirates.
It's not pirates specifically. Like you can be it's in the age of sail sort of. And obviously the name Seas of Havoc is a little fantastical. So it's not overly historically accurate or anything like that. But you can be like you could be a pirate, or you can be like an admiral or a corsair. I'm trying to remember the other types of characters that we've got brainstormed. There's like a treasure seeker, who's like a pirate who he doesn't care about like stealing stuff as much as he cares about like finding shipwrecks and like digging up treasure. So Seas of Havoc is something we're working on. we actually should be having more, and that's sort of, we're in our production now, so we'll start leaking images and pictures of these characters soon, I would think, as illustration and graphic design comes in, because they're all working on it and we have sketches. And then the other big game that I'm working on that I feel like will never be done is a game called StarDriven Saga. It is the spiritual successor to Maximum Apocalypse. So while working on this most recent Maximum Apocalypse expansion took me quite a long time compared to the first two expansions that came out. I sort of took a step away. I hit some development snafus. We were working on other games. But when I returned to it and really started working on it, and working with Todd and traveling with Todd to these conventions, in car rides, he's a huge sci-fi guy. He's watched like every sci-fi thing. He's a huge Star Trek guy specifically. And I love sci-fi in general, but I'm not a Star Trek guy. I'm more like an Expanse, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars guy. So we were just talking sci-fi on like this 10-hour drive to Gen Con. And we started throwing out ideas for games. He has an idea for a game. I had an idea for a game based on sort of similar tenets of sci-fi, like things that we both agreed on are really cool in sci-fi. So I started making a cooperative game based on that universe, and Todd is making a head-to-head game based on that universe. So we're working on this huge sci-fi sort of IP, and StarDriven Saga is like Maximum Apocalypse, where you'll be exploring planets and flipping over tiles, just like you flip over tiles in Maximum Apocalypse. But I wanted to make it a lot less combat focused. So I feel like there's no sci-fi games out there, board games, that just are about exploration first and foremost. I mean, there is combat in the game. You know, obviously there's ship combat and bad stuff happens. That's core to sci-fi as well. But the coolest thing about sci-fi for me is just like going to a new world that's weird and crazy and discovering what's on there. And flipping over tiles and cards and exploring what is on a planet, I think is a really exciting part. Was always an exciting part of Maximum Apocalypse and could be a really exciting part of a sci-fi universe. So StarDriven, we've been playtesting it since the end of 2020. But because it's sort of campaign focused, and there's a lot of branching story paths, it's one of those things like it's gonna take development wise, it's gonna take forever. I think plus it's something I'm super passionate about, and I feel really strongly that it could be, you know, our biggest game that we've done so far. And I have the same excitement I had for Maximum Apocalypse before it came out, and that was super successful. So there's also a lot of personal, I don't know, pressure to like make it to meet a certain bar. So, you know,
it's very good. I do like to talk to people about the designers, particularly about the expectations they have for their games, because often, depending who you speak to, really, some designers say they have no expectations. Some, like Isaac Childress, told me that he'd like Frostgrave to be slightly less successful than Gloomhaven. That was his bar, and you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to make the perfect spiritual successor.
Yeah. So I mean, it is, and the thing is, it's a spiritual successor. It's not a sequel. So like Frosthaven to Gloomhaven. I played same world, same. I mean, I'm assuming I haven't played it obviously, but I'm assuming same basic mechanics with drafting the cards and setting initiative, like the same basic combat loop. So for StarDriven, I've definitely done a lot more than that. You know, I've introduced dice. You know, dice sort of are your action. One of the annoying things about Max Apocalypse is you have 4 actions, and unless you have the playmat, there's no real way to count them. So for StarDriven, I wanted to introduce. I think it started as cubes, like, oh, we're gonna give people cubes they can just count, and then I was like, why aren't they dice? Let's do different colored dice. Different colored dice are good at different things. And like we're gonna have character creation. So like there's, you know, more and more stuff. As always in development, you add more and more stuff and you trim it down. So like it's a constant growing and shrinking of sort of what's in there, and you sort of end up with what's at the core. And the core of what we have for StarDriven has not changed. So I'm very confident about what the core of the game is going to be. it's all been, oh, now that I've seen 10 playtests, that card is way too good. Like that person used that card way too effectively to like remove any threat that they were up against. Like they just got rid of everything, and now they can just like sit back and relax for 3 turns. Like that's that type of. I don't like that there's no tension. Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's very good.
but that kind of balance is fun. So it's about that balancing and then balancing the different threads of the story because I'm taking Todd's lead on this, and yeah, for the game we're describing our story threads as there's episodes, and that's sort of like what a play session can be. So imagine an episode of a sci-fi show. An episode can be 30 to 60 minutes, and you can finish a mission and get some experience points and sort of save the game, or you can play an arc, which is sort of like the story thread to get to the resolution is sort of played over a sequence of episodes, and that may take you, depending on how many episodes are in the arc, that could take you several hours.
Cool. This sounds pretty epic, to be honest.
I think so. I would say the only good thing is as a smaller independent publisher, games are done when they're done, and we don't have to hit something at a certain quarter. You know what I mean? So there's no rush to like get this out there, unless things go really badly with the games that are coming out down the pipeline. But as long as things are relatively the way they've been the past few years, we should have plenty of time to hopefully get everything we want in there, and get something epic out to people.
That's fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great,
and thank you for letting us into all of those absolutely new projects.
Sure. I mean, I always say that we're a shrimp in the vast ocean of board gaming and the internet. So it's like, it's not like Disney. No one is like looking to spoil or ruin secrets or whatever for our games. I think we're okay.
Yeah, not like Disney yet.
Yeah,
there's still time.
Yeah.
Lovely. All right.
I guess that's a good problem to have, right? Where it's like there's literally hundreds of people trying to spoil this thing. So we know we're going to make $1 billion when we release it. So we really got to keep it under wraps.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us.